Have you ever been in a really bad situation, maybe in a relationship, where there were huge, obvious warning signs waving right in front of you, but you just ignored them and thought they were no big deal? The person who wrote the first story we are going to talk about today definitely did exactly that. Right now, in my ongoing Minecraft game, I am building a big village. But anyway, now that I have said that, let's get right into the stories for today. The very first story comes from the r/nosleep page on Reddit, written by a person named Sapphire Lion 15. I found a really weird advertisement for watching a house, and it looked like the absolute best chance ever. It said it would be super easy to get paid. They needed someone to watch a house for a weekend, which was 3 days and 2 nights, with all meals provided for free, and they would pay an amazing $500 for every single day. I had to call a woman named Agatha. Wow, $500 a day. It totally made me think of that creepy house from the movie Monster House. I really should have paid more attention to the warning signs and been more careful. But back then, I had just finished college, I had a ton of student loans to pay back, and I was having a really hard time paying my rent every month. I was actively looking for any kind of steady job, just anything that would let me buy the basic things I needed without going completely broke. I found the paper flyer stapled to a tree on a street in the city. I had watched houses for my friends and family before, and this flyer didn't say anything about watching pets or taking care of kids or anything like that. Also, the money they were offering would pay for my whole rent for the next month. And if I did a good job, this could turn into a regular job that kept happening. I called the number, thinking it wouldn't hurt to just check if it was real. Agatha, an older woman, picked up on the second ring. She said she knew it sounded too good to be true, and she offered to prove it was real by giving me an address to look up and her full name to search for on the internet. I put my phone on speaker and checked it out. It turned out Agatha was a very famous person about 10 years ago. She was a well-known fashion critic, famous for having great taste and being almost like she could predict the future when it came to fashion trends. After she retired, she became a loner and almost never left her house. But because delivery people were always at her door, it showed she was still alive. And she was super rich. Because she was born into a rich family, she had way more money than some small countries. Even though this job was just for the weekend, Agatha kept talking and said, "I have a bunch of trips I have to take. If this first weekend goes well, I might offer you the next weekends for double the money." My jaw almost dropped. I could make $3,000 in just one weekend. Back then, I thought she was just super generous or didn't understand how much money was worth. Thinking about it now, I realized that should have been a huge warning sign, but I was so desperate for money that I didn't care. So I said yes right away. I was supposed to get there on Friday morning at exactly 10 o'clock. When I got inside, she told me I wasn't allowed to leave until Sunday afternoon when she was coming back. So I had to bring everything I needed for my 3-day stay. Even though I thought this rule was really weird, I didn't want to mess up a deal with someone who could fix a huge part of my money problems. Agatha's house was a totally beautiful and huge mansion, looking like it had been rich for a long time. It was 3 stories tall, painted completely white, with a balcony looking out over the front yard. The grass and flowers were cut and taken care of perfectly. There was a gold statue of a bunch of brass musical instruments standing tall in the middle of the garden. At first, I thought this job was going to be great, but then my thoughts were interrupted when I saw the dolls. Standing on poles on both sides of the front porch were 2 giant dolls. They looked like they were made of rough cloth, and their skin looked like burlap sacks. Each one was about 6 feet tall, and because they were on poles, they looked at least a foot taller than that. They didn't have mouths, but they had 2 huge black circles sewn onto their faces for eyes. Their hair was made of messy black yarn. I couldn't figure out how the yarn hair hadn't rotted from being outside in the weather. They were made to look like a man and a woman couple. The man doll's yarn hair was styled to look like a mop-top haircut, and he was wearing a black suit from the Victorian times. The woman doll was wearing a light purple ballet-style dress with black leggings, and her yarn hair was tied up in a messy bun. They both had a very gothic, dark style. Even though I was surprised to see these dolls, especially since they didn't match the rest of the house, I just brushed it off as a weird hobby Agatha had. After all, rich people have strange hobbies all the time. When I knocked, Agatha practically pulled me inside. She was a woman in her late 60s, dressed very nicely. I saw a suitcase next to her. She seemed happy I was on time and that I brought both a suitcase and a duffel bag. "Did you bring everything you need?" she asked, not even saying hello. "Everything I will need," I said. "Great, great. Oh, my taxi is here," she said. I looked through the still open front door and saw a taxi pulling up next to my old, beat-up Prius car. "I will pay you as soon as I get back," she said, picking up her suitcase. I don't have time to explain everything, so I left a list of rules on the kitchen table. "Follow them exactly, and everything will be fine. I will see you on Sunday." Then she left and closed the door behind her. I stood there for a second, wondering if it was normal for someone to just leave their expensive house with a total stranger so quickly. I put my bags down in the entryway and walked through the big house until I found the kitchen. Just like she promised, there was a list of rules. It was written on fancy custom paper, with a sticky note that said, "Please follow all rules." I started reading it carefully. Some rules were normal, but others were really strange. 1. Please feed the goldfish in the library. Their food is in a jar on the cabinet next to the fish tank. Give them only 1 pinch of food a day. 2. Every night at exactly 9 o'clock, you must be in the living room, looking out the big picture window. You have to watch everything they do. Do not look away. They like having an audience. When they bow to you, clap your hands 3 times and close the curtains. Make sure you open them again in the morning. My first thought was, are you serious? From feeding fish to watching them. What the heck? No. 3. Please do not smoke or vape inside the house. If you really have to, only do it on the balcony. 4. If you take any books from the library, put them back exactly where you found them. 5. If you get hurt or feel sick, sleep on the couch on the back patio. Be out there by 9 o'clock, and you will feel better in the morning. 6. On Saturday night, put a paper plate with frozen, crinkle-cut carrot slices on the welcome mat. Make sure you do this by 6 o'clock. Don't worry about getting the paper plate back. They never leave any food behind. 7. Ross, the gardener, comes on Saturday morning. Jeb, the special gardener, comes every Saturday evening. Do not talk to either of them, and do not tell Jeb that I am not home. 8. Be completely quiet while you watch them. They will let you sneeze or cough, but any other noise will make them mad. You can use the streaming service for yourself. If you order pizza or any delivered food, leave a note saying where it is and how much it cost, and I will pay you back. Eat anything you want from the fridge. The rules about feeding the fish, not smoking, and cleaning up after myself were easy to understand and do. Fish are easy to take care of, and I don't smoke. But the other rules were definitely weird, to say the least. Still, they were all pretty simple to do, and Agatha was being super generous. I decided to just deal with the weird stuff. I have to admit, though, that the times she talked about, they made my stomach feel tight with worry. I spent Friday mostly just walking around the huge house and finding the rooms mentioned in the rules. The library was on the 2nd floor, right next to my guest room, which looked like a fancy hotel room. The back patio was a fully closed-in deck with furniture, glass doors and windows to keep the weather out, and an air conditioner to keep it comfortable. The living room was surprisingly huge. You could park a car in it and still have room for 10 people. The big picture window from the rules took up a huge part of one wall, with fancy red velvet curtains that looked like they belonged in a movie theater. After eating some delivered pizza and drinking a Mountain Dew, I saw it was 9 minutes to 9. My curiosity was stronger than my fear, so I went to the living room and looked out the big window. The sun had already gone down, and the porch light and garden lights were shining on the front yard. Then, exactly at 9 o'clock, just as I started to wonder what the big deal was, it happened. The 2 dolls I saw earlier jumped off their poles. There was no warning at all. 1 second they were completely still, and the next second they were moving like it was totally normal. The male doll held out his arm to the female doll, and she took it gracefully. They walked onto a bare patch of grass right in front of my window. The male doll touched the statue of the musical instruments I saw earlier, and a creepy, weird music started playing in the air. Then, right in front of my eyes, they started to dance. It wasn't a waltz or salsa or any dance I knew, but it was definitely a dance. They moved perfectly to the music, never looking away from each other. Sometimes the male doll would dip or spin the female doll before they went back to their slow dancing. My heart was beating so fast as I tried to understand what I was seeing. My eyes were stuck on the two of them. Finally, the music slowly stopped. The dolls stopped moving and turned to look right at me. They had known I was there the whole time. I stayed completely frozen, as still as a rock, while their dark, mysterious eyes stared at me. Then, at the exact same time, they bowed. Remembering the rules, I clapped my hands loudly 3 times and quickly pulled the curtains shut, closing them as fast as I could. Then I ran out of the room as fast as I could. I hurried to my guest room, staying away from all the windows because I was worried they might still be looking at the house. I ran up the stairs 2 at a time and slammed my door shut when I got to my room. Breathing really hard, like a scared little kid, I crawled under the bed, shaking. How, in the name of everything logical, did that just happen? Did Agatha know this was going to happen? I had just taken my phone out of my pocket, thinking about what to do next, when it buzzed. It was a text message from Agatha. "I know you must be scared, but don't be. They just want an audience, nothing else. Just follow the rules and you will be safe." I sent her a bunch of messages, mostly begging her to explain, but she didn't reply. I spent the rest of the night under my covers in the guest room, holding my stuffed sea turtle and refusing to look out the window, just in case one of those dolls was staring back at me. Morning finally came. I was so tired from being scared and not sleeping at all, so I went downstairs to make some coffee. I froze when I heard a noise outside, but then I remembered the rules. One of the gardeners always came on Saturday mornings, and I wasn't allowed to talk to them. Even though I really wanted to see another human being, just to make sure I wasn't going crazy, I decided to follow the rules, which meant I had to open those living room curtains. Holding my breath, I pulled them apart and felt a mix of relief and shock when I saw that the dolls were back on their poles like nothing had ever happened. I ate a bowl of cornflakes and drank a cup of really strong coffee for breakfast, deciding to watch comforting movies until I could convince myself the whole thing was just a crazy dream. Sadly, that plan was ruined when, while walking back to the TV room, I tripped over my own sneaker that I had left on the floor. Even though the fall hurt, it was nothing compared to the sprained ankle I got from it. I bit my arm to keep from crying out and managed to limp back to the kitchen to get some ice. I did end up watching movies, but now I had to because I was stuck on the couch. I wondered how I was going to walk up the stairs that night with my hurt foot until I realized something. According to Agatha, I was supposed to sleep on the back patio if I got hurt, which meant I wouldn't have to see those creepy dolls. Even though the whole situation was still super confusing, the idea of a quiet night brought me some comfort. I spent the rest of the day carefully following the rules, putting the chopped carrots on the welcome mat after the special gardener left. I understood why he was called special when I saw him carefully dusting those weird dolls. After feeding the fish, I started my night routine, which was harder because of my hurt ankle. By 8:50, I had settled myself on the back patio. The patio couch was as soft as a bed, and there were plenty of pillows, so I found a comfortable spot even after using 2 pillows to prop up my foot. I got a blanket from the linen closet and got ready for a full night of sleep. I had just closed my eyes and was starting to fall asleep when I heard it. That creepy, weird music. I pulled the blanket over my head, too scared to even think about doing anything else. As I listened, the music got really loud at midnight. I froze, wondering what that meant. For a few minutes, it was totally quiet. Then I heard it. The sound of 2 pairs of unnaturally light footsteps. They moved together slowly, like they were in no hurry, and they were coming toward the porch. Terrified tears ran down my face as I silently begged them not to come any closer. The footsteps kept coming onto the deck, and then the door to the back patio swung open. My heart jumped into my throat as I heard 2 sets of feet coming closer. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, but I couldn't. Not with The blanket was pulled away from me. The female doll was standing right next to my head, holding the blanket in one hand as she looked at me. I was about to scream when she let go of the blanket and put her hand over my mouth. Her other hand rested on my hair. She started to move her hand through my hair in a rhythm, almost like she was petting me. Her eyes stayed locked on mine, Two hands grabbed my hurt foot. I looked toward the end of the couch and saw the male doll holding my swollen foot. Just like the female doll, he was staring right at me. He lifted his hand and snapped his fingers, and I passed out. When I woke up, the sun was shining. Everything that had happened came rushing back to me, and I looked down at my hurt foot. But it wasn't hurt anymore. It looked like I had never been hurt at all. I got off the couch and stood up to test it. It was perfectly fine. Agatha's text message came back to my mind. They just want an audience. Nothing else. Just follow the rules and you will be safe. I guess part of keeping their audience happy meant making sure the audience was healthy. Feeling totally better after a night of rest, I waited impatiently for Agatha to come back at 3 o'clock that afternoon. When she finally walked into the house that afternoon, she had a look of giving up on her face. She put her bags on the floor and gave me a tired smile. "I will unpack, make us some tea, and explain what I can," she said. That was all she said until she finished unpacking and turned on her electric kettle. Only when we were both holding hot cups of chamomile tea did she start to talk. "I don't know where they really came from," she started, "or even what they really are. But when I turned 50, my health started to get worse. And because I have so much money, I became a huge target for thieves and people breaking into homes. Jeb's brother came to me right after my 50th birthday. He said he had a way to make sure I stayed healthy and safe. All I had to do was give them an audience." She stopped and took a sip of her tea. "The day after I said yes, I woke up and found the two of them standing at attention in my yard. The person who sold them to me just told me I must never take them away and that I must always watch their night dance. At first, I was just as confused and terrified as you are. But then, when I got a really bad flu a week after they showed up, they came into my house in the middle of the night and healed me. Since then, I have realized that they are actually protectors as long as you act as their audience. This is why I almost never leave my house. Someone has to be there to make sure they have an audience, to stop them from stopping their protection of the house and whoever lives inside. But last week, my brother-in-law was tragically killed in a car crash, and my sister was completely heartbroken. I had to go stay with her to help her feel better. That is why I was willing to pay a total stranger so much money just to watch the property. We kept talking for a while, but in the end, I felt like I understood the situation pretty well. I was still creeped out by the whole thing, but after the dolls had healed me, my fear had gone down a lot. Because of that, I became Agatha's regular house sitter. It was a great deal for both of us. She could finally travel and visit family she hadn't seen in years, and I got a steady, high-paying job in exchange for watching her house and, of course, the dancing dolls whenever she needed me. I had been her regular house sitter for about a year when Melanie called. Melanie was the kind of sister you wanted to avoid talking to. She had been a pretty mean person since the day she was born, and her behavior had only gotten worse as she got older. It didn't matter how many times my parents punished her or how often she got in trouble at school. Any mistake she made was never her fault. If anyone else had something, she had to have it too, and if anything didn't go her way, she would throw a long, loud fit. When I started college, she threw a huge fit about not being able to go too, until they let her take an early test. Even though she passed, I still think she bought the answers. She packed her stuff and went straight to the admissions office. She immediately became a bother to everyone on campus. Any time she wasn't in class was spent hanging out with fraternity guys or drinking way too much. She always skipped classes, yelled at her teachers whenever she actually showed up, and finally had to rent an apartment off campus after she yelled terrible things at a transgender person, which got her kicked out of the dorms. She eventually got expelled from the school completely, and my parents refused to let her move back home until she started acting like an adult. She promised to prove them wrong by marrying a rich man within 3 years. In the 3 years since making that promise, she had gone through 4 different boyfriends and 9 different jobs, mostly working at fast food places. Refusing to admit she failed, she started trying to beg for money from any relative who didn't already hate her. So, it shouldn't have surprised me when she called me, using that sickeningly sweet voice she always used when she wanted money or a favor. And he totally broke up with me for absolutely no reason and said I would never get a job at his dad's modeling studio, she complained, finishing a totally fake story and adding a few fake sniffles. So, anyway, If you know of any jobs, could you help me out? Sorry, Melanie. I can't help you look for a job, I interrupted, finishing packing clothes and my stuffed turtle into my duffel bag. I have something really important to do this weekend. Liar, she screamed through the phone. Mom mentioned you got a high-paying job working for a rich woman. I want in. I sighed. My mother has no filter and tends to tell everyone everything. It's not that simple. This is truly a job for only one person. Great, then quit and I'll take it. What's the address? I hung up the phone. Melanie had a unique ability to only hear what she wanted to hear in reality. Knowing how crazy my sister had always been, I really should have seen the mess that was about to happen coming. Agatha's brother needed hip replacement surgery, and on very short notice, she offered me $7,000 to watch the house for a whole week. Naturally, I said yes. $7,000 to watch a mansion and see a few minutes of moving decorations every night? An easy choice. I eagerly asked for the address. The rules hadn't changed. I had them memorized. I thought I knew what was expected. Besides making sure the fish were fed and watching the doll's nightly show, my days at Agatha's house were peaceful. What I didn't expect was the uninvited guest on the very first evening of my time there. Agatha rarely had visitors unless they were hired help. So, the unexpected knock understandably scared me. I checked the clock. 8:30. I thought I had plenty of time to politely send away whoever was at the door before the dolls started their routine. Sadly, when I opened the door, expecting a religious person or maybe a door-to-door seller, I was faced with my own sister. Hey, Tiffany, I started. Thanks again for the job. But Melanie didn't even acknowledge that I hadn't gotten her a job. She walked right in, her signature bubblegum pink suitcase rolling behind her, her predictably self-centered attitude coming in before her. She started talking nonstop, explaining how she had manipulated Mom into telling her what city I lived in and who my employer was. From there, she had carefully searched the internet for Agatha's name, eventually finding her address. After that, she said she was super happy to work for a fashion critic, claiming she was totally qualified to judge other people's clothes. As a quick side note, this woman is completely crazy. My first thought was to push her outside once the dolls started moving, hoping they might somehow catch her and, well, make her disappear. I finally found my voice, needing to speak louder to be heard. Melanie, I did not get a job for you, and I am definitely not giving up my position to you. You need to leave. She froze. I hoped my words had finally gotten through to her self-absorption and looked at the clock again. 8:50. I had to act fast. Maybe I could offer to book her a hotel room. And you self-centered. Excuse me? She shot back. You know how badly I need a job. You knew I was perfect for the fashion critic job, and you wouldn't even give up your spot to me. You are unbelievably selfish. Melanie, you're losing it. Why are you trying to get rid of me? You are. I can tell. Mom and Dad threw me away. Grandma cut me off after I sold her car. Uncle Jake kicked me out when I broke his microwave. My boyfriend left. Every employer hated me. Now, even my own sister. Well, too bad. You won't get rid of me that easily, you know? Maybe if absolutely no one wants you around, it's time to, take a good look in the mirror. Maybe think about how to improve yourself. Anyway, let's keep going. She grabbed one of Agatha's antique vases from a shelf and violently smashed it against the wall, sending glass pieces flying everywhere before walking toward me with the broken vase. My basic survival instincts kicked in, and I ran toward the nearest exit, spotting the back door. As I ran, the doll's creepy music started. My heart sank. I was too late. What would happen if I broke the rules? Come here, you family traitor, Melanie screamed, momentarily making me forget my fear of the dolls. I tripped over one of the patio's decorative plant pots, landing flat on my back. She was on me in a second, her eyes wide with crazy intensity as she tried to stab the broken bottle into my throat. I pushed her away with every bit of strength I had, my heart beating impossibly fast. She had way more strength than I did, a strength I didn't expect. She started pressing the bottle against my neck, the sharp edges drawing blood. Then, Melanie's eyes locked onto something behind me, and she stopped. What the? She was suddenly lifted off me. My hands instantly flew to my throat, gasping as I pressed against the stinging cuts. Thankfully, I could still breathe, and to my huge relief, the cuts were shallow. Before I could stand up, I felt arms letting go of me. I turned around, and for the first time, seeing the female doll brought a feeling of relief. Muffled screams caught my attention, and I looked at the male doll, who was holding back my struggling sister. The female doll kept holding me as she watched her partner drag the fighting Melanie away toward the patio. From the front yard, the creepy music got louder. With the female doll and me as their audience, the male doll carried Melanie in a bridal style toward a bare patch of grass. There, he started a slow, solo dance. It looked a bit like tap dancing, but made way more complicated because he had to hold a fighting woman. As he spun her around, Melanie seemed to enter a trance-like state. He gently put her down, and she stood there, a blank smile on her face. Their dance turned into something like a waltz, with him leading her through a bunch of dizzying spins. As the music reached its highest point, he hugged her one more time. She looked at him with an expression of pure wonder, a huge smile on her lips. The female doll then turned me around, making sure I was facing the house entrance, away from the male doll and my sister. The sound of tearing fabric echoed, followed by a blood-curdling scream, Melanie's scream, and then silence. The female doll guided me to a seat on the back patio's couch as the male doll came back. He was alone. The female doll put a hand on my throat, checking the cuts. Then, with a sharp snap, I passed out. The next morning, I turned on the news and found out that a woman's body had been found in the woods, about a mile away. Her beat-up car had been found nearby. Based on the condition of the body, the main theory was that she was driving through the woods, stopped for an unknown reason, and was tragically attacked and killed by an animal, most likely a bear. I had a very strong suspicion, but I kept my mouth shut. Given Melanie's amazing ability to make anyone hate her if they spent more than 30 seconds with her, there was a noticeable lack of people mourning her. Agatha, upon hearing the news, called me. It turned out this wasn't the doll's first time intervening. "Just be glad they like having an audience," she said, her tone very dark. A lump formed in my throat as I understood what her words meant. If they ever find out you had no good reason to miss a show, why am I telling all of this now? Agatha finished her will yesterday. She has left her entire estate to me, with total control over what I do with it. My immediate choice is to sell the property. The money from the sale will pay off the rest of my debts. And honestly, I don't need such a huge house. I finally managed to talk to Jeb, asking if he could take care of the dolls when the house is sold. He told me that was impossible. The house is now their home. It will be a long time before Agatha passes away, especially since she is guaranteed to be healed from any sickness or injury. However, when that time comes, be warned. If you ever see a beautiful mansion for sale, along with a list of strict rules, follow them very carefully. They will not tolerate a disruption to their audience. You know, folks, I think I would be quite happy living in this house. I'm curious about your thoughts. Let me know in the comments section if this would be a good house for you. But I genuinely feel I could do great here. After all, if you can live in a mansion where you are always safe from harm or sickness, or if you do get sick or hurt, you're magically healed overnight, all while just watching some creepy dolls dance, that seems like a fair trade. They must be really good dancers, having performed for such a long time. Anyway, a huge shout out to the author, Sapphire Lion 15. Thank you for letting me share this story. It was truly amazing. I highly recommend checking out more of their work. The link to their Reddit profile is in the description below. Now, let's move on to today's next story. Our next tale comes from NoCardiologist 1353, also from the r/nosleep page on Reddit. It's titled, "Something Keeps Trying to Get Invited into My House. Never, under any circumstances, knock on my front door. Don't even think about it. If you are a salesperson, keep walking. If you are a Girl Scout, move on to the next house. We don't care if you can see us through the window or hear us moving around behind the door. We will never open it. We can no longer tell who to trust. All we know for sure is that whatever is hiding outside cannot get in unless we give it permission. It all started about a week ago when I was home alone. My wife and our 2 sons were staying with my mother in Phoenix for the week, while I, with a lot of reluctance, stayed behind to avoid any connection to my name if our company's upcoming layoffs ended up affecting our branch. Deep down, I really wanted to be relaxing in the sun with my family. However, reality meant I had to give up my vacation days hoping to keep my job. Monday ended at 5 o'clock, and I left the office right away. On the way home, I stopped at my favorite Chinese restaurant. If I couldn't enjoy my family's company, I could at least eat General Tso's chicken. I pulled my car into the garage, quickly changed into sweatpants and a plain t-shirt, put on my slippers, and settled into my most comfortable recliner chair. As I turned on the TV and opened my takeout container, I sighed, letting out all the stress from the day, and got ready to relax. It had barely been 15 minutes before my peace was ruined by the loud ringing of the doorbell. I rolled my eyes and muttered, "Wonderful, just perfect." When I opened the door, I was met with one of the weirdest sights I had ever seen. Standing right there on the very edge of my home's doorway was a salesman. Not the kind of salesman you might see in modern neighborhoods, wearing bright-colored polo shirts and khaki shorts, trying to sell solar panels or new roofs. No, this salesman looked like he had walked straight out of the 1960s. He was wearing perfectly shined black formal dress shoes, a light gray 3-piece tweed suit, and a matching gray fedora hat. The man himself was the exact picture of a 1960s gentleman. Tall and thin, with neatly cut and styled brown hair, a clean-shaven face, and a dazzlingly white, perfectly straight set of teeth. In one hand, he held a brown leather briefcase, and next to him stood a very old Hoover vacuum cleaner. As our eyes met, he smiled, took off his fedora, and in a quick but smooth voice that sounded like an old-fashioned baseball announcer, he asked, "Good evening, sir. It is always a pleasure to meet a fellow citizen. I represent the Hoover Company. Might I step inside for a brief moment to show you the amazing abilities of the modern home vacuum?" I couldn't help but laugh. "Wow," I said, "that's quite an outfit. I feel bad for you having to wear that in this heat. Is Hoover celebrating an anniversary or something?" The salesman kept up his act. "No, sir. Nothing unusual. Just the standard Hoover experience. May I come in?" I narrowed my eyes a little bit. No. I guess this is the answer most people would give." At this, his smile dropped. He stared blankly for a moment before saying, "You will not let me inside?" "No," I repeated. "Why not?" he asked, his voice getting softer. "Look, man, this is my house, and I don't need a reason to say no to entry." He looked at me with a blank stare again before whispering, "Please. Folks, I know we are in the middle of scary stories, but honestly, that's pretty funny. I don't know about you all, but I wouldn't be able to stop myself. I'm letting him in." He said, "Please." As in, what? You're going to turn him away? Anyway, let's keep going. I could feel my patience running out. "No, now go away." With that, I slammed the door in his face and walked back into the entryway. But through the fogged glass of the front door, I could still see his outline standing on the porch. I held my breath, watching, hoping he would leave. After about 3 minutes, he was still completely still, and my temper flared up. I threw the door open and yelled into his wide smile, "Get off my porch right now, or I'm calling the police." He stared, and his smile seemed to get even wider. After half a minute, he slowly backed away from the porch. His eyes never left mine, and his smile didn't drop until he reached the sidewalk. At that point, he turned and walked away. A creepy feeling stayed with me, so I locked the front door before going back to my recliner. I finished my meal, watched a few hours of TV, and went to bed. At 1 o'clock in the morning, the deep silence of the house was broken by the loud ringing of the doorbell. I'm not sure how long it had been ringing before it woke me up from my sleep. Barely awake, I stumbled out of bed and into the hallway, really hoping this was just a bad dream. As I got close to the front door, a bright light cast a long shadow of a man into my home. Opening the door, the light was blinding, and it took a moment for my sleepy eyes to adjust. As they did, the figure in front of me spoke in a loud, bossy tone. "Sir, I am with the police. We received a complaint from this address earlier today. May I come inside and discuss the details?" My mind struggled to keep up, and in my confusion, I replied, "Wait, what are you talking about? We are just following up on the call we received. May I come in and take your statement?" My confused thoughts started to make sense. I had not called the police today. I was completely sure no one else in my family had either. The figure stayed silent for a moment before saying, "Nevertheless, sir, if I could come in, we could fix this matter." It was at this point that I noticed the man's uniform. It was old-fashioned, the kind of clothes worn in the 1980s. In fact, the man's whole appearance looked like a police TV show. He was wearing dark aviator sunglasses, and his face had a thick handlebar mustache. I looked at him and asked, "What is your badge number?" He gave no answer. "Do you have a warrant?" "No," was the short answer. "Then you cannot enter." "If I had one, would you let me in?" I didn't answer, instead slamming and locking the door. The man pounded his fist on the door for about 15 minutes before giving up and leaving. After an hour of calming down, I finally went back to sleep. When morning came, I easily convinced myself that the weird encounter from the night before was just a strange dream. I blamed it on the bad Chinese food, but after a quick shower and a simple breakfast, the event faded from my memory. Work was boring, just the dull routine of an underpaid accountant for a failing company. I missed my family and wished more than anything that I had gone with them. 5 o'clock arrived, and I left right away, soon finding myself stuck in the purgatory of rush hour traffic. It was 6:30 by the time I reached my quiet neighborhood. As I got close to my house, I saw a figure standing on my porch. It was a man. He was wearing a light gray jumpsuit, like the ones worn by janitors or plumbers in movies. He was facing the door, one hand raised, knocking rhythmically and limply. "No way," I said in disbelief as I drove past the front of the house toward the garage on the side. As I passed, the man noticed, and his head slowly turned toward me, following my path as I disappeared around the corner. The last thing I saw before the car vanished behind the house was the man leaving the porch and walking toward the garage. "Not again," I muttered out loud. By the time I parked and got out of the car, he was already there, standing just outside the open garage door, like an invisible wall was stopping him from going further. "Hello," he said in a cheerful tone. "We received a call earlier about a burst pipe, and no one answered the door. May I come in and check it out?" I stared at him as he spoke, and he didn't blink even once. A wide smile stretched across his face as he finished, like it was his default expression. "No, no one called you. No one has even been here all day, so you should leave," I said, feeling a surge of annoyance. The corners of his mouth twitched almost invisibly, and through the gritted teeth of his smile, he said, "So, you are here alone?" I swallowed and replied shortly, "That is none of your business. Leave now." At that, like a switch had been flipped, he went back to acting like a charming tradesman. "Really, sir, I must insist. Just let me come in and take a look. Dealing with a flooded basement is hardly a relaxing way to spend an evening. No, I must insist that you leave right now and never come back." His unblinking eyes narrowed at this statement. The weird smile came back as he stepped backward. As he reached the end of my driveway, I heard him quietly say, "See you later." With a deep sigh, I closed the garage door and went upstairs to change out of my work clothes and take a shower. I had planned to grill that evening for dinner. I had put some steaks out to thaw before leaving for work that morning, but shortly after my shower, it started to rain. Not wanting to give up my cooking plans, I decided to leave the grill in the garage, pull one of the cars out, and leave the garage door open to let the smoke out. The smell of the cooking meat mixed with the cool, earthy smell of the rain, calming my nerves and momentarily letting me forget about both work and the creepy solicitors. Just as the steaks were almost done, the storm outside got noticeably worse. I soon saw a figure running through the heavy rain. Took me a moment to realize they were heading straight toward my garage. It looked like a young girl, no older than 12 years old. She ran with all her strength, but when she reached the edge of the garage, she stopped suddenly. I looked at her cautiously. Even through the rain, it was clear she was crying. For a moment, my guard went down. I had met a lot of strange visitors in the past few days, but this was just a child in distress who needed help. So, I don't know about you guys, but at this point in the story, I'm thinking vampires, right? Like, that's the only thing that makes sense with them having to be invited to cross the threshold into the house. Anyway, we'll find out together. Let's go ahead and continue. Without thinking, I moved closer to the garage entrance. Hey, are you okay? Do you need help? I asked, my dad instincts taking over. Through sobs and sniffles, she weakly answered, "They're chasing me. They want to hurt me. Please help me." I took another step closer. Who is chasing you? How can I help? At that question, a thin grin spread across the girl's face, and she said, "May I come inside? I don't think they'll find me if I'm in there." At that, something in the back of my mind broke through my parental concern. Something was wrong. I stared hard at the little girl's face, her unblinking eyes looking back at me. A chill ran down my spine as I realized I recognized this child. Everyone in this neighborhood knew her. This was the Johnson girl. Last summer, she was kidnapped while riding her bicycle to a friend's house. The whole community searched for weeks. Her devastated parents made emotional pleas to her kidnapper on the local news. For months, there was no trace of her. But at the end of September, her body was found floating face down in a nearby reservoir. The thing in front of me was wearing the exact same clothes the Johnson girl had worn when her body was found. A white long-sleeved shirt and dark blue jeans with mud stains around the knees. The smile on its face got wider as we locked eyes. The fingers of its left hand twitched violently. My throat felt dry as I managed to squeak out a single question. "What are you?" At this, the thing tilted its head sharply to the side before cheerfully answering through clenched teeth. "I'm a little girl." Instantly, her face dropped the smile, and the fake act of a distressed, crying child came back. "And I really need to hide in your house. Please, mister. They'll get me." Cold sweat formed on my forehead as I slowly shook my head. "No, go away," I stammered. At this, a low growl came from the little girl's lips, and evil filled her eyes. For one terrifying second, neither of us moved. Then, in a blur, she lunged toward me. However, as she tried to step through the doorway, she became stiff, like she had crashed into an invisible wall. She cried out, "Let me in!" Over and over, she thrust her fist forward, mimicking the action of pounding on an unseen wall. I didn't even bother taking the stake off the heat as I turned around, pressed the button for the garage door, and hurried inside. That particular night was awful. Whatever thing was hiding outside my house did not leave. Instead, it spent the entire night screaming and pounding on every entry point of my home. The sound of its cries was horrible, filled with rage and a wild desperation. With each hit, I was sure the glass would break or the doors would give way, yet they stayed strong. They groaned and moved under the attack, but they held firm. I was completely unable to sleep. The thing's presence made sure of it. Even from the second floor, the violent impacts and furious wails reached my bedroom window. Every so often, I saw its shadow lit up by the headlights of passing cars. Sometimes the shadow looked like a young girl. Other times it took the shape of a salesman wearing a fedora or a police officer. No matter the disguise, the screams kept going. Those same raspy, unearthly shrieks I had first heard coming from the garage. I spent the rest of the night hiding in the upstairs bathroom, the foundation of the house shaking from its violent tantrum. Dawn arrived, and exactly 30 minutes after the sun rose above the horizon, the loud noise of banging and screaming suddenly stopped. After a night filled with such creepy sounds, the house felt unnaturally quiet. Carefully, I came out of the bathroom and looked through the bedroom window. Outside, everything looked normal. It seemed to be a regular day in my regular neighborhood. As I went downstairs, I found myself carefully checking every window and door, yet I found nothing. Not a single mark on the glass or a damaged bush in the garden. Nothing at all showed the disturbances from the previous night. I started to question my sanity, but I was reluctant to leave the property. In a state of panic, I called my boss, pretending to be sick. I told him I probably wouldn't be able to come in for a few days. He replied with sarcasm, "Just know that I will remember this in a few months." I didn't care. Losing my job was the least of my worries. The following days were torture. Every evening, around 7 o'clock, a figure would appear on the porch and knock on the door. "Is anyone home? May I be allowed inside?" Sometimes the voice sounded like a young girl. Other times it copied a police officer or used the smooth voice of a traveling salesman. It even used new voices. "May I step inside?" asked an old woman. "Come on, man, let me in," begged a teenage boy. Sometimes it tried regional accents, though it always messed them up. On one occasion, it started with a Russian accent and ended with a strong Hispanic accent. Its British accent was weirdly mixed with a deep Southern drawl, but it kept trying. As each hour passed, its behavior grew more and more angry and aggressive. The initially calm tone slowly turned into anger and eventually exploded into screams. The knocking turned into violent pounding. However, every morning, exactly 30 minutes after sunrise, all activity suddenly stopped. I had not slept for days and was paralyzed by fear at the thought of going outside. A growing sense of dread filled my thoughts, as I knew I would eventually have to face the outside world. My wife and sons were scheduled to return by plane. My boys were supposed to start their high school baseball practices the next week and needed to be back in time to get ready. Also, I was responsible for picking them up from the airport. I knew I couldn't ask my wife to get a taxi. I wouldn't be able to believe they were truly them unless I saw them getting off the plane myself. So, with shaking hands, I pushed the button to open the garage. I stood and watched for several moments, but no one passed by. Gathering my courage, I got into my car, closed the garage, and drove toward the airport. It was a huge relief to see my wife and sons. After so many sleepless nights and lonely days, just being around them felt like a refreshing breath of air. I hugged my wife. As we pulled apart, she looked at me closely. "Dear, you look quite sick," she said with genuine worry. "I'll explain later," I replied with a tight smile. "It's just wonderful to see you." She smiled and briefly kissed my cheek. "We missed you," she said. During the drive home, I tried to explain the situation to them. I told them how, over the past few days, weird people had been trying to get into our house. I'm sure I sounded completely crazy as I described the vacuum cleaner salesman from the 1960s or the ghost young girls. When I told them about the nighttime pounding and screaming, and suggested we might want to spend a few nights at a hotel, my wife looked at me, gently put her hand on my arm and asked, "Are you feeling all right, dear?" My youngest son joked, "Have you been doing some recreational drugs, Dad?" My wife quickly interrupted, "I'm sure you are under a lot of stress and haven't been getting enough rest. I will gladly give you a shoulder rub this evening." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. After all, they would soon see my story for themselves at 7 o'clock. The afternoon went by slowly as my family started unpacking their things. I found myself packing a separate bag, planning to leave the next morning after they experienced what I had gone through. 7 o'clock arrived, but to my amazement, no weird visitors came with it. I sat close to the front door, watching the clock, but nothing happened. No knocking, no voices from the other side of the door. It was amazingly peaceful. By 8:30, I let myself breathe a cautious sigh of relief. Maybe it had finally left. Maybe the events of this week were just an elaborate joke played by the neighbors. I walked around the house until 9:45, at which point my wife asked if I was coming to bed. As promised, my wife gave me a shoulder rub. Before long, my tired eyelids couldn't stay open anymore, and I fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up feeling refreshed. I had been deprived of sleep for days, and that night, I slept deeply without any disturbances. I smiled and stretched, thinking to myself, I am so relieved that ordeal is over. I went to the kitchen where I made myself a cup of coffee and some toast, which I ate while looking at Facebook. A few minutes later, my oldest son came downstairs and walked into the kitchen. He looked at me with a huge grin. I nodded and said, "Good morning." He took a cereal bowl from the cupboard. As he did so, with his back turned to me, he asked, "Hey, Dad, why did you need me to let you in last night?" "Oh, that's right. You guys are caught." Yes. So, his teenage son clearly had let it pass right in one ear and out the other. "Do not let anyone in, even if they look like me." I was thinking the entire time that the family he picked up from the airport wasn't actually his family, but that didn't seem to be the case. I like this comment saying, the real villain of this story is your boss. Honestly, that's such facts. Anyway, that's all the scary Reddit stories in Minecraft I have for you today. If you liked today's video, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe as it helps me out greatly. Huge shout out to my channel members. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you guys do want to further support the channel, that link is going to be in the description. However, it is not at all required, completely optional. And with that, I will see you in tomorrow's video. Peace.